This video is sponsored by Delete Me. On the night of May 20th, 1982, the largest naval task force since World War II arrived off San Carlos water. 2 carriers, bristling with Harriers. 2 assault ships packed with Royal Marines. A wall of destroyers and frigates flanked them, with submarines and supply vessels behind. A fortress of steel, moving across the South Atlantic. The wrath of Britain was descending upon a tiny speck of land, but one that was not going without a fight. Over the horizon, flying low, striking in packs, defending aviators were bracing to launch an impossible mission against a world superpower. And before the day was done, Britain would learn a lesson it would not soon forget. At San Carlos, the British task force was sailing into a narrow landing area with almost no room to maneuver, knowing their every move was being watched. Similarly, you might think you're navigating open waters, but you're really being flanked when you're online. Data brokers quietly collect and sell your personal information on people's search sites, getting bundled into profiles and sold to anyone with a credit card. That kind of exposure makes it easier for bad actors to target you with scams, phishing, impersonation, or harassment. At Dark Seas, we take great care with what's tied to our names, which is why we use Delete Me. This hands-free subscription service removes your personal information from hundreds of data brokers and people's search sites. After we signed up, our first privacy reports showed just how much information had accumulated on us over the years. Delete Me staff handled the removals and keeps monitoring those sites so they can submit fresh opt-outs when the data pops back up. Delete Me has spent years focusing on this kind of personal data removal, using its own technology and highly trained personnel to keep your data safe. Moreover, they give you access to real privacy advisors to find a solution for you. If you want to cut down on your exposure on those data broker databases, visit joindeleteme.com/darkseas and use promo code DARKSEAS for 20% off all consumer plans, or scan the QR code on screen. The fleet at San Carlos could not choose who was watching them, but you can decide how much of your life is visible to strangers online. The South Atlantic autumn of 1982 brought more than seasonal storms to the waters around the Falkland Islands. It brought the most significant British maritime task force assembled since the Suez Crisis. The choice of landing site would determine not just tactical success, but whether Britain could sustain the political will for a campaign 8,000 miles from home. San Carlos water presented itself as both the perfect spot to land in and a lethal snare. This inlet on the western coast of East Falkland offered a sheltered anchorage for the vulnerable logistics ships, beaches suitable for landing craft, and most crucially, the surrounding hills that would mask ships from the sea-skimming Exocet missiles that had already claimed HMS Sheffield on May 4th. That loss, the first Royal Navy warship sunk in action since World War II, had shattered any illusions about Argentine capabilities. However, the very features that protected them also constrained them. Ships anchored in San Carlos water would have limited room to maneuver when the inevitable air attacks came. The narrow entrance meant vessels would queue up like victims for the slaughter if things went wrong. British planners betting on this location were essentially gambling that the protection from exocets and the element of surprise would outweigh the vulnerability to conventional air attack. Brigadier Julian Thompson's 3rd Commando Brigade would spearhead Operation Sutton, the amphibious attack. His force comprised the cream of British infantry, Royal Marine Commandos toughened by Arctic training, and paratroopers ready to prove their motto, ready for anything. The landing was set for May 21st, though few knew that Argentine eyes were already watching. Special boat service patrols had been inserted by submarine in early May, their mission to ghost through the darkness and report on Argentine positions. These elite operators found the San Carlos area lightly defended. This intelligence bred dangerous overconfidence that would cost the British dearly. What the SBS couldn't detect in their necessarily limited reconnaissance was that on May 15th, First Lieutenant Carlos Esteban had positioned his combat team, Gamez, made of 62 men from the 25th Infantry Regiment, on Fanning Head, a promontory commanding the entrance to San Carlos water. Esteban's force hauled 2 105mm recoilless rifles and mortars up the windswept heights, transforming Fanning Head into an observation post that could rain fire on any approaching fleet. The Argentine lieutenant understood his mission perfectly. He couldn't stop an invasion, but he could ensure Buenos Aires knew precisely when and where it came. Meanwhile, aboard the ship for the British task force, young sailors, like midshipman Charlie Threlfall, prepared for combat. Every sailor understood they were sailing not just into danger, but into history. The night of May 20th, 1982, brought a starless sky. At 2 a.m., landing craft loaded with men from 40th Commando, 45th Commando, and 2nd Para turned toward their designated beaches: Blue Beach at San Carlos Settlement, Red Beach at Ajax Bay, and Green Beach at Port San Carlos. The operation evolved as planned. Troops splashing ashore in bitter cold, weapons ready for resistance that didn't come at first. For 50 minutes, the British landing proceeded in eerie quiet, save for the sounds of vehicles rolling off landing craft and the muffled commands of NCOs organizing their men in pitch blackness. Then, at 2:50 a.m., the Argentine patrols on Fanning Head finally realized something was off and pinpointed the invasion fleet in the distance. Lieutenant Roberto Reyes' group opened fire with everything they had. The 105mm recoilless rifles roared to life, their muzzle flashes turning night into a strobing light show. Mortar rounds whistled through the air, their impacts throwing geysers of water between the landing craft. The British fleet's response was immediate and overwhelming. Naval gunfire lit up Fanning Head like a volcano, the thunder of 4.5-inch guns echoing off the surrounding hills in a continuous rolling barrage. A 25-man SBS detachment had been tasked with silencing Fanning Head. These commandos now raced up the heights under fire, their assault a textbook demonstration of the efficiency and brutality of British commandos. The Argentine defenders, soon to be known as the Fanning Head Mob, fought with determination, but were overwhelmed by aggressive tactics and sheer brutality. Before withdrawing, they managed to disable their communications equipment to prevent capture, but not before achieving something remarkable. In the chaos of the firefight, Argentine small arms fire brought down 2 British Gazelle helicopters in quick succession. The first Gazelle, caught in the crossfire, spiraled into the freezing water. Sergeant Andy Evans struggled in the sea as Argentine troops continued firing at the crash site. His co-pilot's desperate attempts to save him proved futile. Evans became one of the first British casualties of the landing. Minutes later, the second Gazelle, apparently unaware of the fate of the first, followed an almost identical flight path into the battlefield zone. Machine gun fire riddled the light helicopter, taking the lives of Lieutenant Ken Francis and Lance Corporal Pat Giffen instantly. The aircraft crashed in a ball of flame. As dawn broke over San Carlos water on May 21st, it revealed an extraordinary sight. 3,000 British troops were ashore, their positions expanding by the hour. At Port San Carlos, 2nd Para had discovered the local Argentine garrison quite literally asleep. As an entire battalion with armored vehicles materialized on Green Beach, Argentine soldiers scrambled from their beds and fled into the hills without firing a shot. One British report noted the almost comic surprise of the defenders. It confirmed British intelligence assessments that the Argentines hadn't expected San Carlos as the main landing site. HMS Fearless and HMS Intrepid, the Royal Navy's amphibious assault ships, disgorged their cargo of heavy equipment, field guns, and supplies. Scorpion and Scimitar light tanks rolled onto the beaches, followed by 105mm light guns that would provide artillery support for the advance inland. Royal Engineers began constructing field hospitals and supply dumps, transforming the beachhead into a sustainable military base. But even as British forces consolidated their position on land, Lieutenant Esteban, who commanded the Fanning Head position, managed one crucial act. At 8:22 a.m., he successfully radioed Argentine headquarters at Goose Green, confirming the British landing location and strength. The Argentine High Command in Port Stanley initially received this news with skepticism. Could San Carlos be the main effort, or was it an elaborate diversion for the real assault closer to the capital? This hesitation would prove costly, but one element of Argentine forces suffered no such doubt. Orders flashed to air bases on the mainland, Rio Gallegos, Rio Grande, Comodoro Rivadavia, and to the small airfields in the Falklands themselves. The message was simple: attack immediately. Attack with everything available. The The morning of May 21st started with one of the most audacious individual attacks of the entire war. At approximately 10 a.m., Lieutenant Guillermo Owen Crippa took off from Stanley Airfield in his Aermacchi MB-339 light attack jet. What followed was either sublime courage or complete madness, possibly both. Crippa flew alone, without wingman or escort, straight down San Carlos water at mast-top height. Twice he overflew the entire British invasion fleet, so low that sailors could see his face through the canopy. Anti-aircraft fire erupted from every ship: 10mm Ehrlichen cannons, 40mm Bofors, small arms, anything that could be pointed skyward. Crippa pressed on, strafing HMS Argonaut with his 30mm cannon and unleashing rockets at supply ships. The damage was minimal, but the psychological impact was enormous. One Argentine pilot, alone in a light aircraft, had penetrated the entire British defense. More importantly, Crippa survived to report what he'd seen: at least 24 British warships and transports packed into San Carlos water. For this extraordinary feat of reconnaissance under fire, he would receive Argentina's highest decoration for valor. His flight also served as the opening act for what was to come. 4 Argentine Pucará turboprop attack aircraft from Goose Green arrived next, attempting to strafe British positions. These aircraft, designed for counterinsurgency rather than high-intensity warfare, met fierce resistance. HMS Ardent, positioned to defend the southern approach, engaged them with a 4.5-inch main gun, an unusual anti-aircraft weapon, but effective at close range. British SAS troops on the ground launched a Stinger missile, the heat seeker finding its mark and forcing Captain Benitez to eject from his burning Pucará. Squadron leader Nigel Sharkey Ward, leading the Sea Harrier Combat Air Patrol, spotted the remaining Pucarás attempting to escape. His Sidewinder missile transformed one into a fireball, while another limped back to Stanley with severe damage. These early victories eliminated the limited Argentine air assets based in the islands, but they were merely the prelude. From 10:30 a.m. onward, the main assault began. Waves of Argentine jets from mainland bases, flying at the extreme limit of their range, descended upon San Carlos water. They came in sections of 2 to 4 aircraft, using terrain-following flight profiles to avoid radar detection, splitting up at the last moment to divide the British defenses. Midshipman Charlie Threlfall would later recall the chaos aboard HMS Broadsword, quote, "There were around 35 air attacks that first day. We took multiple cannon hits, and 14 of our crew were injured. We were hit by cannon fire that ripped holes into part of the ship. I vividly remember us working back to back, bashing in these bits of wood to plug the holes with a rubber mallet, and seeing an Argentinian aircraft drop its bombs at the same time." The Argentine ultra-low-level bombing runs came with a specific consequence that would shape the entire battle. Many bombs didn't have time to arm before impact. The safety mechanisms designed to protect aircraft from their own weapons now saved British ships from destruction. HMS Antrim exposed the situation better than most. Captain D'Amelio and Lieutenant Castillo's daggers dashed in at wave-top height as their 1,000-pound bombs slammed into Antrim but failed to detonate. Minutes later, Major Martinez led another trio of daggers in attack. Again, bombs struck, one tearing through Antrim's stern, but the fuses failed. The destroyer was peppered with holes, her superstructure scarred by cannon fire, but she remained operational and fighting. HMS Broadsword's Seawolf missile system claimed at least one dagger, Lieutenant Bean's aircraft disappearing in a ball of fire and debris. But even this modern frigate wasn't immune. An A4 Skyhawk's bomb actually struck Broadsword, but bounced off the sea into her side without exploding, saving the ship from destruction. But the luck of the British was bound to run out. HMS Ardent's fate on May 21st would truly show the horror of Bomb Alley. Positioned dangerously close to shore to provide naval gunfire support against Argentine positions around Goose Green and Darwin, she presented an irresistible target for the waves of attacking aircraft. The first blow fell at 2 p.m. Captain Pablo Cruz Carballo led his section of A4B Skyhawks up San Carlos water so low, the sea spray coated their windscreens, obscuring their vision. Through the salt-streaked glass, Carballo spotted Ardent near the coast, her 4.5-inch gun firing steadily toward Darwin. Carballo's approach was textbook. He released two 500-pound Mark 82 bombs with surgical precision, both scoring direct hits on Ardent. But in what was becoming a cruel pattern for the Argentines, neither bomb exploded. The impacts alone caused significant damage, starting small fires and wrecking equipment, but Ardent survived this first assault. 40 minutes later, the second wave arrived. Major Horacio Mir Gonzalez led Mirage 5 daggers of Grupo 6, their call signs, Cueca and Libra, checking in as they descended from altitude. Gonzalez chose his attack angle carefully, diving out of the sun to blind the British gunners. His bombs, retarded tail variants designed for low-level release, found their mark with devastating effect. The explosions demolished Ardent's forward hangar, the ship's Westland Lynx helicopter disappearing in a ball of flame and twisted metal. Her Sea-Cat missile launcher was blown apart, removing her primary air defense system. One bomb punched through Ardent's stern without detonating, but the others transformed the frigate into an inferno. Ardent began limping northwest, seeking the umbrella of other ships' anti-aircraft fire. Her crew tossed live ammunition over the side to prevent cook-offs, while firefighting teams battled flames that seemed to spring up faster than they could be extinguished. But before she could reach safety, the final blow fell. At 3:15 p.m., Lieutenant Commander Alberto Jorge Filippi led 3 Argentine Navy A4Q Skyhawks from the 3rd Naval Fighter and Attack Squadron in the day's most precise attack. Filippi, with his wingman Lieutenant Benito Rutolo and Lieutenant Marcelo Marquez, had flown the entire distance from Rio Grande at wave-top height, their fuel gauges hovering near empty. They climbed slightly for their attack run, then dove on the stricken Ardent in a perfectly coordinated skip-bombing attack. Each pilot released multiple 500-pound bombs across the frigate's length, while simultaneously strafing with a 20mm cannon. Brilliant stuff coming from what the British had deemed a tactically inferior force. This time, there would be no reprieve from faulty fuses. The bombs detonated in sequence, explosions ripping through Ardent's hull and superstructure. The frigate was enveloped in black smoke and debris, her fate sealed. As Filippi's section pulled away from their devastating attack, British Sea Harriers pounced from above. Lieutenant Marquez's Skyhawk exploded, taking him with it. Filippi's aircraft was hit by a Sidewinder missile. He ejected at an estimated 900 kilometers per hour, far beyond the safe ejection window. Somehow, he survived with relatively minor injuries, parachuting into the waters of San Carlos Bay as the battle continued to rage overhead. Commander Alan West, Ardent's captain, who would later rise to First Sea Lord, directed the evacuation, quote, "We had bombs that straddled us, and bomb that went straight through us. I was dodging bombs. It was quite clear from all the reports that we were about to explode, and we were sinking by the stern, and I ordered abandon ship." Royal Navy helicopters and landing craft rushed to pluck survivors from the oil-slicked water. HMS Ardent finally succumbed in the early hours of May 22nd, settling to the bottom of San Carlos water. 22 of her crew had perished. More than 30 were wounded. Commander West would receive the Distinguished Service Cross for his leadership during those hellish hours. The morning of May 22nd came with an unexpected break. Bad weather over the Argentine mainland grounded most aircraft, giving the British crucial hours to converge their defenses. Additional Rapier surface-to-air missile batteries were helicoptered into position around the beachhead, thickening the air defense network. Ship damage was assessed and patched where possible. The wounded were evacuated, and ammunition was redistributed. But May 23rd would claim another victim in spectacular fashion. HMS Antelope, sister ship to the lost Ardent, took up air defense duties in San Carlos water. Around midday, A4 Skyhawks found her. 2 500-pound bombs slammed into Antelope, but continuing the pattern, failed to explode on impact. They lodged deep within her machinery spaces, ticking time bombs in the most literal sense. That night, a Royal Navy explosive ordnance disposal team began the delicate work of defusing the unexploded bombs, but one of the undetonated bombs proved fatally unstable. The explosion tore through Antelope's hull, igniting her ammunition stores in a catastrophic chain reaction. A photographer captured the moment, a colossal fireball erupting skyward, illuminating San Carlos water in hellish orange light. The image would become one of the war's most iconic, showing the world the Falklands War was not a mere colony conflict. It was a brutal affair. The blast broke Antelope's back. Fires raged uncontrolled through her compartments. Her crew evacuated as she settled under the shallow bottom of San Carlos water, her twisted superstructure remaining above water as a monument to the battle's fury. 2 British servicemen were lost in the explosion. Lieutenant Ernesto Guadagnini, the Argentine pilot whose bomb had sealed Antelope's fate, never knew of his victory. Antelope's guns had shot down his Skyhawk as he released his bombs, a simultaneous exchange of death. May 24th revealed cracks in the Argentine will. At mainland air bases, pilots who had flown multiple missions into Bomb Alley began to question the strategy. Some engaged in what amounted to a brief protest, reluctant to continue what they saw as unrealistic missions without better coordination from Navy and Army forces. Inter-service rivalry and poor communication had plagued Argentine operations from the start. President Leopoldo Galtieri himself flew to Commodore Rivadavia Air Base to rally the pilots. By the time he arrived on May 25th, Argentina's Independence Day, the air crews had already resolved to resume maximum effort. National pride demanded one more supreme effort against the British invaders. Despite the turmoil, several attacks occurred on May 24th. RFA Sir Lancelot took a direct hit from a bomb that failed to explode, adding to the growing tally of British ships saved by Argentine fuse failures. In a moment of battlefield confusion, one Argentine flight accidentally bombed their own garrison at Goose Green, mistaking it for a British position. 4 more Argentine aircraft fell to British defenses that day, the attrition steadily depleting Argentina's air strength. Argentina's Independence Day would deliver the final devastating blow of the San Carlos combat. HMS Coventry and HMS Broadsword had positioned themselves northwest of the main anchorage as radar pickets, hoping to provide early warning and interception of incoming raids. Their isolation made them vulnerable. Late in the afternoon of May 25th, 4 A-4 Skyhawks from the Argentine Air Force's Group 05 approached in 2 pairs, flying so low their jet wash left wakes on the water's surface. Broadsword's sophisticated Seawolf missile system locked onto the first pair, but at the crucial moment, the system malfunctioned. Some accounts suggest Coventry's hull masked the radar at the critical instant. One Skyhawk seized the fleeting opportunity, releasing a 1,000-pound bomb that tore through Broadsword's aft section. Charlie Threlfall was aboard, quote, "On the first pass, they put a 1,000-pound bomb into our back end, which luckily didn't go off. It hit the ship's side, about 10 feet above the waterline, and deflected straight out again. If it had exploded, we'd have sunk immediately, and I wouldn't be sitting here now." The second pair of Skyhawks, with Captains Pablo Carballo and Carlos Rinca among the pilots, found Coventry unable to engage effectively at close range. Her Sea Dart system, designed for long-range interception, couldn't track targets approaching at wave-top height. In seconds, at least 2 500-pound bombs slammed into Coventry and detonated, one in her computer room, another in the engine rooms. The destroyer immediately began tilting to port as massive explosions tore her hull apart. Commander David Hart Dyke gave the directive to abandon ship within 20 minutes. HMS Coventry was toppled and sank in no more than half an hour. 19 of her crew perished, but heroic rescue efforts saved most. Broadsword, despite her own damage, lowered scramble nets and launched boats, pull survivors from the oil-covered water. Threlfall would later remember, quote, "I can still clearly remember the sight of Coventry heeling over. It was horrendous." That same day, the container ship Atlantic Conveyor fell victim to an Exocet missile in a separate attack, while Sir Lancelot was hit again and set ablaze, though her crew escaped without casualties. By evening of May 25th, the Battle of San Carlos was over. The British had lost 3 frontline warships, with others damaged. 49 personnel had lost their lives, and over 80 were wounded. Argentina had lost approximately 22 aircraft and 11 pilots, a rate of attrition their air forces couldn't sustain. The Argentine failure to dislodge the beachhead, despite the savage mauling of the Royal Navy, sealed the fate of their garrison in the Falklands. Admiral Sandy Woodward would later call the Argentine pilots bloody good and admit San Carlos was, quote, "a very near-run thing." The battle had demonstrated that modern naval forces remained vulnerable to determined air attack, but also that air power alone couldn't reverse an amphibious landing without coordinated ground forces. The Argentine High Command's initial hesitation, their fear that San Carlos might be a diversion, had squandered their best opportunity to counterattack when the beachhead was most vulnerable. Within days of the battle's end, British forces would break out from San Carlos. Second Para's victory at Goose Green on May 28th began the advance that would culminate in Argentina's surrender at Port Stanley on June 14th. The waters of San Carlos returned to their natural calm, but beneath the surface rest the war graves of Ardent, Antelope, and Coventry, monuments to 5 days that shook the South Atlantic and proved that conventional warfare between modern militaries could still produce scenes as brutal and spectacular as those from World War II. If you want to take more control over where your personal information appears and get it removed from data broker and people search sites, head to joindeleteme.com/darkseas and use promo code DARKSEAS for 20% off, or scan the QR code on screen. Avoid the fate of the British forces at San Carlos. Don't underestimate your enemy.